Good evening. Fantastic to be here this evening, and Happy New Year, of course, as well to you all, and Ni Hao Ma.
Ni hao.
Big thank you to Lindy Lee for joining us this evening. It is really great to be here, and of course tonight we're going to be talking a lot about Lindy's work and about the thought processes that go into her work and her art and her spirituality, all those sorts of things. Of course, some traditional Chinese elements that come into that too. So it is good to be here to talk with you, Lindy. I think you might need to bring your microphone somewhat closer. Lindy, can we first begin by going deep?
Deep.
Very deep, back into your deep history.
Back into a deep history, okay.
Now let's go back to, because you actually were born in Brisbane to Chinese immigrant parents, and I wanted to kind of go back a bit because the last 30 years your work has really encompassed and explored the idea of self and identity and spirituality. But firstly, just take us back to the journey, your journey into art.
My journey into art. How many hours have you got?
We've got about half an hour, but okay. Let's keep it brief. What was, I suppose I want to know, were you always going to be an artist?
I think so. Look, I think that there are some people, it's a curious thing. You know, you, for some reason, first of all, you claim the world by drawing it, if that makes sense. So that was what I was like. I was just drawing the world all the time. But drawing itself isn't enough. Okay, so some question, this is my theory and I'm so sticking to it, but there's some question that forms usually, and mostly I think it forms out of a hurt or a difference, a sense of difference. And when I was growing up in Brisbane, I think the first thing I noticed when I was at school was that I was different from everybody else. And I would have this experience of going to the Chinese club on a Sunday and wanting to eat hamburgers, and of course there was all this black bean and fried rice and chow mein and all that sort of Chinese food, which I kind of thought, ugh. And then on a Monday, and I didn't feel as if I belonged there also, because everybody had my face, but they didn't have my sensibility, if that makes sense. So on a Monday I would go to school, and I would really want to be a blonde surfy chick, and that was not going to happen. So
not for me either, I have to admit.
So really, it's just that sense of whatever is the dominant thing on the horizon, and not being able to meet that, and feeling that you needed to be with that, but feeling divided from it. And I think that was the question, and that was the experience that kind of threw up this question. Well, if I'm not this and I'm not that, what the hell am I? So, questions of identity, everybody. That's how it starts.
So art was always going to be the perfect vehicle for you to discover elements about yourself, to express it to us.
Yeah, I think so, because first of all, it's the visual connection with the world, but art is not just about that, but it's about the, I'm going to say spirit. When I say spirit, I don't mean it, you know, it's a very tricky word to use. What I mean about spirit is that spirit is the 10,000 things, the 10,000 experiences that each and every one of us have that is actually invisible. Okay, so that which is invisible that makes us. So art allows that.
So tell me what some of your early explorations were like.
In art?
Yes. What were you doing? No, in netball. In
netball. I hated netball.
I was a pretty good goalkeeper, but moving along.
Okay, moving right along. You know, I think the one thing that people don't quite appreciate, I also teach, and we have this thing which I explain to my students called the second year crisis. Okay, so the second year crisis is when you've been absolutely dying to get to your own practice. You've had first year, you've had, you know, all sorts of disciplines to learn, and then all of a sudden you're let loose in your studio, in this little cubicle basically, and you face these walls, and the first question or the first experience you have is fear that rises up, because you've waited for this moment, but what the hell are you going to make art about? So that was actually I had a lot of that in art school. And I studied in Brisbane and in London and back in Sydney. But it wasn't until I got back to Sydney and I realised that what I had to do was actually just allow myself to be attracted to images and then allow a kind of deeper intuition to take place. And that's when I started to actually use a lot of European imagery in my work. That was 20-something years ago.
There was a lot of appropriation, wasn't there? Sort of drawing on Renaissance painting and many other different things as well.
Yeah.
And then it shifted, of course, I imagine, through time. And one of the things that you've talked about quite a lot and is very important and intrinsic to your work is the fact that you're also a Buddhist, a Zen Buddhist as well. Tell me a bit about how that came about and why that came about and how, I suppose, the intersection between that and your practice.
Such a good question. Trying to get a really pithy answer. First of all, let's go back to the fact that really it's about, all of my work is about, it's not so much a search for identity, but an understanding of what this is. And fundamentally, this is the central Zen Buddhist question. You sit for long hours in meditation, meeting yourself and meeting the fluidity of what you are and the ungraspability and all these sorts of things. And I realised that when I first started to meditate and I first started to come to Zen practice, that it actually had formulated all the questions I was trying to ask with my work but I didn't actually have the discipline, or the spiritual discipline anyway, to work that through. So it was with when I became a Zen student that everything started to fall into place. This is sort of like, but halfway, this is 20 years ago now. But I'd still been an artist for some time because it's nearly 30 years that I've been an artist.
Did you become a better artist?
Yeah, sure.
You can interpret that in a variety of ways, by the way. I'm just trying to think what that might mean. A better artist could mean that you practice more, you practice better, you wake up every day and do it. I don't know. How would you describe that?
It's a great privilege being an artist on one level because different people have different reasons for being an artist. And if I'm really truthful, the only reason that I'm an artist is because I really do care about this question about the nature of what self is. So becoming a Zen student, a Zen Buddhist, it actually helped me to focus in on that question.
You told me that your mum said something pretty cool when you converted. What was that?
Oh, the thing is that my mother has 4 children. 2 of them are sort of slightly more Chinese than I am, and the other 2, that's my brother and I, were as oka as anything. And so when I finally confessed to my mother that I'd taken up Buddhism, she went, "You? Buddha? No, why?" Because it was so contrary to what she'd expected. Because I was the one, truly, I wanted to be the surfy chick. I wanted to be president of the Monkeys fan club, all that sort of stuff. I confess.
The Monkeys fan club?
Yeah.
Good. Because that's really sad, because I was going to take on that job, and anyway.
Well...
You took it from me.
No, actually, I wasn't voted in.
So now we've talked about the fact that Zen Buddhism has entered your work. I'm curious about how then it has started to feed directly into your work, because it's part and parcel, isn't it? And in particular, I'm thinking of a work that you did in an exhibition in 2009 at Rosalind Oxley, and it's a work called True Chien. Tell me about that work and how it connects.
True Chien is one of my favourite Zen stories. Okay, when you're a Zen student, you not only sort of sit in long hours of meditation, like you get up at 4 and go into a retreat and, sit all day and then go to bed at about 9:30. But you're also sometimes given stories to contemplate, and these stories are called koans. And these koans are really paradoxes. They present dilemmas. And this particular dilemma of True Chien, it's one of my favourite stories. And it goes something like this. Okay, so there's a little girl, her name is Chien, and she grows up with her cousin, her boy cousin. And they play so well together. Her father says, "Oh, Chien, when you grow up, you and he will marry and you'll be very, very happy." So they take that to heart and they think, okay, we're going to get married. We belong to each other. But comes the time Chien's like 17 or whatever, and her father just blithely announces, "Oh, by the way, I've you're betrothed now to the merchant down the road, you're going to marry him. And this absolutely devastates her, and it devastates the young man too. And so much so that the young man decides that he can't live in the same village with her anymore. His heart is broken, he has to leave. So he gets into a boat in the middle of the night, starts to travel up, and then Chien starts to run after him and says, wait, I'm coming with you. I'm going to leave my family, I'm coming with you. So they go off together and they go into the next province, 5 years down the track, they've had a couple of kids, 10 years goes by, they're very happy. But one morning Chien wakes up and says, husband, I feel my father's grief. I know I hurt him terribly, so I've got to return. And the husband, being the good chap he is, says, okay, let's travel by river, go down to see your father, but let me go and just break the ice first. So they do that. So Chien is waiting by the river. The husband knocks on the father's door, and the father comes out and he says, oh, nephew, it's so wonderful to see you, and he's really pleased to see the young man. And the young husband is very perplexed by this because he thought, oh, he's going to be so angry, And then the father says, I'm so glad to see you because the night you left, Chien became very ill and she went to her bed and she is deathly pale and she has never risen from her bed in these 10 years. And the husband goes, but this can't be right. Chien is down by the river waiting for your okay to come up. And the father says, no, come to Chien's bedroom. And so they go there, and sure enough, there's Chien. And she's absolutely still, like death. And the husband just doesn't understand. He says, well, father-in-law, come with me. I must take you to my wife, your daughter. And anyway, as they come out of the house, Chien from the river comes up. And the Chien in the bedroom rises. And they both meet outside, and the two Chiens hug each other. So the koan is, or the story is, and what you've got to puzzle out, which one is the true Chien? The one who stays behind, the ghost, the spirit, or the one who went off and had a family and lived her life? And there is an answer to this, but it's something that you have to puzzle out. And, for me, this story is about a divided self, okay? And my divisions are quite obvious, My most obvious division is sort of living or feeling as if I don't actually belong in either Chinese or Anglo culture, but somewhere in between. But everybody has these dilemmas. You choose one path in life, then this other path is, pretty well forever denied, perhaps. This causes pain. It's a great story to sit in meditation with.
The way that you create the image, though, to describe how it is that you respond to this paradox, you do this using Eastern and Western images, is that right? It is. It's. I suppose I spent the first 10, 12 years of my life using Western imagery, using, the Renaissance portraits and things like that you've mentioned. And it wasn't until I was a few years down the track I realised that I wasn't just being smart and postmodern about this and smart and being an appropriation artist, but it was actually that what I was actually working with was a copy. And somehow the copy was more precious to me in a personal way than the original, because in fact what it was is that I'm a really bad copy, and that's good. I'm a bad copy in the sense that I can't ever be perfectly Chinese. I mean, I go to China once or twice a year, only to be confronted by my terrible not Chineseness. And then I'm in Australia, and then in Australia I will wear this and my top knot and all that sort of stuff, and I'm Chinese. But I think that, again, it's just that's the metaphor that I was working with. But again, I think it's something about existence too. Everybody has this. None of us will ever fulfil the ideal somehow.
And where we don't meet that ideal is actually where we live, where we exist.
Through your art, though, are you trying to do more than just simply understand what that ideal might be? Is it something more going on there?
Yeah, it's about this thing. The great privilege of being an artist for me is the great possibility of, I'm going to be corny, finding your own truth. Absolutely thump. Trying to uncover something that is true.
Can we talk about fire for a second? Because you've been doing a bit of fire lately.
I've been doing a lot of fire.
This particular work that you were talking about before, True Chien, involves fire. Fire has become quite important to your work.
Yeah.
Pretty recently, but you've been thinking about it for a long time, haven't you?
Yeah.
Why is fire so important to you?
Again,
and are we safe from you, by the way?
Sorry?
Are we safe?
You're safe, yeah. I actually got up at 3 o'clock this morning. I have a show next week that opens at Rosalind Oxley. And I actually use soldering iron and fire. But yesterday, because it was so hot, I couldn't work, right? So I had to go and get up middle of the night and to burn these holes. Now, it seems like it's a very far thing away from this question of identity or self, but it's not. Because if you sort of go really deeply into the question of what exists in here, beyond, through everything, there is something quite elemental. And so I began to be interested in things like fire and water and the things that are very basic. And, we all know the basic elements, that sort of thing. But also, there's another layer. It's about, again, Buddhist metaphors about the fire of being, which is, right here. But also, I love the idea of the fire of delusion. That is, one of my Zen teachers said to me once, the first thing you do when you meditate and you wake up in the morning is, what is the delusion du jour? What is the fantasy today we're going to entertain? Okay, so the path of meditation, the path of Zen, is also the path of delusion. And I love the story of what fire is, okay? So fire is something, when you think about fire, you always think about the flame, okay? But actually the fire is fueled by something. So it's a wood fire, a gas fire, a brush fire, whatever. But it's fueled by something. So something has to ignite it and keep it alight. So our delusions or our, how do I describe it? Well, just the constructions that we habitually hold on to about ourselves are also delusion. But in order to burn those delusions, you actually have to meet with them. And so the path of Zen is to walk the fire of delusion. Does that make sense?
I think so. I think so. So from fire to the process of splashing, or another very traditional practice, in fact, which is called flung ink. Is that right? It's a very traditional Buddhist practice as well, which has been present in your work for quite some time, but has also reappeared more recently in a different kind of manifestation. Just tell me a little bit about what interests you and what this is. Firstly, the use of ink and where you go today with it.
About 1996 or something, I got a fellowship to Beijing, and this was to learn calligraphy. So I got to Beijing, I found the calligraphy master, and he said all the right things. He said, this is the quiet stroke, this is the silent stroke, this is the good stroke, and this is the bad stroke. It talks too much, and I'm going, yes, I've come here to learn all of this. Fantastic. And I got all my instruments out, my brushes, and I started to do it. It's a very strong discipline. And the moment I did it, within about 2 seconds, it was kind of like, no, mustn't, can't, don't. And I couldn't figure this out. But instead, so I had 3 months in Beijing, and I was supposed to be learning calligraphy, and I was thinking, well, okay, what am I going to do now? But what happened to feel real and true for me, I started to actually throw and toss ink. So I was sort of splashing ink and making paintings from that. It wasn't until the last night I was in China and I caught up with this young artist, and he kept insisting that his work was traditionally Chinese, and I had a look at his work and it was kind of like his experiences in the Red Army and dancing girls and stuff. You know, it was very contemporary imagery, and I kept saying, but how is this traditional? I mean, it's Chinese, but what he eventually told me was that it was the holding of the brush and the ink. That was, and in the way in which he said it, I realised that in order to hold the Chinese brush and ink was so full of history, but I couldn't take it on. Now, when I got back to Australia and I started to read a bit about Buddhist practices and things, I discovered this practice called flung ink painting. And what happens there is that monks would meditate for a while, for a long time, and it was their calligraphy practice. And after meditation, they would take, you know, the tumbler of ink and throw it, toss it. And whatever mark it made was not the monk making that mark, but the whole universe in that moment. And that's an exact expression of who and what we are also. So then I just began to use it. And because of this fire thing, I've come to start using it in more sculptural things. I'm more a painter than anything else. But so what I do now also is go to a foundry and get them to heat up vats of bronze, molten bronze, and we get to toss the molten bronze onto the foundry floor.
Do you toss it yourself?
No, I'm not allowed. Oh. But I'm there. No, you have to leather up, and I just don't have the strength to do it. But I direct the splash.
So literally it's a tub of molten bronze,
yep.
And it just gets thrown, and however it falls is the work.
Well, however it falls is the mark,
yeah.
And then I collect maybe hundreds of these and then make a work out of them.
And that one particular work I'm thinking of is a work called Moon in a Dewdrop as well. It's a beautiful sculpture too. So from flung ink and fire to images, going back to the self a bit, to images of the family. And I wanted to talk a bit about a series of works that you did. The first one I know was exhibited in 2003, but more recently in 2007, these series of works that you did that were called Birth and Death. And these were tracing your family history through generations. Why was this so important for you to do this?
Well, so far my career is sort of like three periods. One is the appropriation. The middle period is the family stuff. And now it's more the works about cosmos. But this work was particularly important for me because I want, well, first of all, at a very personal reason, my nephew had died after a long illness, and by the way, this work is 100 accordion books made up of images from my family of 5 generations. So it's 5 generations of transition, and the faces are it's just red and black. And sometimes when it's installed, I sit in meditation in the middle of it. But first of all, I wanted to give my nephew a sense of his own place, but I also wanted to see the ocean of faces. This work is called Birth and Death, and it's this sort of ocean of faces and the changes that have occurred within 5 generations. And also my family, there's sort of a great and very painful story about my parents coming to Australia, and it has everything to do with Chinese Revolution and White Australia policy. And my father decided to come to Australia back in 1948 or something, but he couldn't come unless my grandfather, who was already here, agreed to return to China. So it was a one-to-one exchange. So he also had to leave behind my mother and my 2 brothers. But by the time my father came to Australia, the Chinese Revolution was happening. So even if my grandfather and my father wanted to return to China, they couldn't. And because of White Australia and Chinese Revolution, my mother and my 2 brothers couldn't come to Australia. So they were separated for about 8 years. So that's why this the family images are really important to me. It's a sort of tracing not just the history, but the journeying, I guess. Yeah.
Do you think you're still discovering it?
I'm always discovering it. But I had a wonderful opportunity, it was about 2 years ago, it was the 35th anniversary of China-Australia relations, and I was able to, I was invited to do an installation of the Australian Embassy in Beijing. And I don't know, I just decided that I was going to do images or make banners of images from my family in the 50s. And so I actually filled the two colonnades and the driveway and just with these red and black images of my family, just their faces. And an extraordinary moment of closure happened, or healing, shall we say, because part of the story of my mother's story is that her mother was thrown into prison during the Chinese Revolution and basically died from neglect. And she's never been able to speak about that. But I used my grandmother's image as one of the dominant images in the Australian Embassy. And the most wonderful thing happened. All the Chinese guards came up to my grandmother and touched her face and said how beautiful she is. And hey, guess what? That was really fantastic because it really brought home, it joined something together. I was able to honour my family in the heart of Australia, in the Australian Embassy, and to honour the experiences of migrants, and also to bring them back to China too. So there was just, it was great.
So can I just quickly ask, you've used bronze, there's wax, there's ink, there's painting, of course, plus the colours you use are quite significant as well. In fact, you've always said that everything that you do, no matter what the material or the colour, is always symbolic. So why is that?
I don't know why it is, but it's true. There's nothing arbitrary about what I use. Everything has to be deeply felt or deeply connected to. I use very specific colours. I don't know if I've got the time to go into them all, but they're very, very specific colours because each colour manifests itself and embodies a constellation of questions that I need to address in relation to my existence. And so that's why the colours are so intense. So I never use anything unless I'm absolutely driven to.
Turquoise, red, black?
Okay, there's always black.
All right, always black.
And that's, in some ways,
I can tell by the outfit. Yeah, just guessing. So turquoise, red.
Yeah. No, there's always black, there's red, ultramarine blue, purple, orange, green. That's all so far, but there might be another colour coming.
They all say, oh, what's the colour?
Not telling.
Oh my gosh. There's a plethora of choices just behind you, by the way.
Yeah, it's there.
Actually, before when you were talking about flung ink, I thought you were going to pick up the cup and go. Good thing you didn't.
I wanted to. But...
Just to wrap up with, you talked about how your art has been in 3 periods. So are we entering into the 4th period now? Can you see yourself doing... I mean, I'm just wondering, what's happening after... I mean, I know the next work is about the cosmos, but where does Lindy Lee go?
She dissolves.
Please don't.
No. No, it's about just this idea, you know, we're now learning this. Okay, this is it was somewhat of a revelation to me when I was sort of thinking about it, but I think we all know this now. You know, we as human beings, because we can harness the laws of nature, we think we are outside of nature, or, you know, we're sort of beyond it or something, but we're not. Nature, you know, the laws of nature are fabric to what we are, and we can never step outside of that. And that's an aspect of cosmos. So, and that cosmos is also an aspect of who we are. So for me, it's always been the same question. You know, what the hell is this that exists? Well, the journeying has taken me to this point of, cosmos.
Well, thank you very much for sharing a bit of that journey with us this evening. Lindy Lee, thank you so much.